Monte Cassino, Italy, February 12, 1944. Sergeant William Bill Jones presses his cheek against the cold walnut stock of his Springfield 1903 A4. Through the Weaver 330C scope, a German machine gun nest sits 600 yards upslope. His spotter, Corporal Thomas Rivera, whispers the windage correction. Jones exhales, squeezes the trigger. The rifle barks. Through the scope, Jones watches his round impact 2 feet left of target. He fires again. Another miss. The German gunners haven't even noticed. This isn't marksmanship failure. This is equipment failure. And across the Italian mountains, it's killing American soldiers. The numbers tell a brutal story. In January 1944, Fifth Army snipers in Italy achieved only a 31% first-round hit rate beyond 400 yards. German snipers, with their Mauser K98K rifles, 67%. The Wehrmacht was winning the precision warfare battle, and American boys were dying because of it. The Springfield 1903 A4 was supposed to be America's answer to German marksmanship. The Army had taken the legendary 1903 rifle, added a Weaver scope, removed the iron sights, and declared it combat ready. On paper, it should have dominated. The Springfield's accuracy was proven. The scope was clear. The ammunition was match grade. But in the mountains of Italy, something was catastrophically wrong. Every American sniper felt it. That uncomfortable, unnatural head position required to align your eye with the scope. The stock was designed for iron sights, mounted along the barrel's center line. But the scope sat higher, forcing shooters to crane their necks, lift their heads, and break the fundamental rule of marksmanship: consistent cheek weld. Without consistent contact between cheek and stock, every shot was a gamble. Slight variations in head position meant slight variations in scope alignment. At 600 yards, slight meant missing by feet. Fifth Army Headquarters knew they had a problem. What they didn't know was that the solution would come from a 28-year-old farm boy from Oklahoma who had never attended sniper school, never studied ballistics, and never designed anything in his life. What they didn't know was that his illegal modification would be dismissed as dangerous, court-martial worthy, and impossible to implement. What they didn't know was that within 4 months, his crude wooden hack would transform American snipers into the most feared marksmen on the Italian front. The Springfield 1903 A4 problem: a rifle designed by committee. The story begins in 1942, when the U.S. Army Ordnance Department faced an urgent problem. American infantry in North Africa reported German snipers were wreaking havoc. Wehrmacht marksmen, equipped with scoped Mauser K98K rifles and extensive training, were inflicting casualties far beyond their numbers. The Army's response was rushed. They took the Springfield 1903 rifle, already in production, mounted a Weaver 330C commercial hunting scope, and removed the iron sights to save weight. The result was designated the Springfield 1903 A4. By January 1943, the first units were shipping to combat zones. The problems emerged immediately. The Weaver scope sat approximately 0.75 inches higher than the original iron sight line. The Springfield stock, designed in 1903 for iron sights, featured a straight comb that positioned the shooter's eye perfectly for barrel-mounted sights. But with the scope's elevated position, shooters had to lift their heads off the stock entirely, creating an unstable, inconsistent shooting platform. Ordnance Department engineers recognized the issue during testing at Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland. Their solution? Issue a technical bulletin advising shooters to maintain firm contact with the stock using the cheekbone area. In other words, they told snipers to somehow make their anatomy fit the rifle. It didn't work. By December 1943, after-action reports from Italy painted a grim picture. Lieutenant Colonel John Hatcher, Fifth Army's senior marksmanship officer, compiled the data. American snipers required an average of 3.2 rounds to neutralize targets between 400 to 600 yards. German snipers averaged 1.5 rounds. At ranges beyond 600 yards, American effectiveness dropped to near zero. The human cost was measured in blood. German snipers dominated key observation posts throughout the Gustav Line. American infantry advancing across open ground faced precision fire from positions they couldn't suppress. Casualty rates in certain sectors reached 40% before units even reached German main defensive positions. The Army tried multiple solutions. They experimented with different scope mounts, attempting to lower the optic closer to the bore. Manufacturing tolerances made this impossible without extensive rifle modifications. They tested padded leather scope covers that shooters could press their faces against. These compressed inconsistently and absorbed moisture, making the problem worse. In January 1944, Ordnance Department representatives visited Fifth Army headquarters in Caserta. Their recommendation: accept the limitation. Focus on shots under 400 yards where the scope alignment issue mattered less. Train snipers to compensate through practice and muscle memory. Lieutenant Colonel Hatcher was furious. You're telling me to accept that American riflemen shooting American rifles can't match German accuracy. That's not a solution. That's surrender. But ordnance had spoken. The Springfield 1903 A4 was in full production. 50,000 rifles were already manufactured or in the pipeline. Retooling for a new stock design would take months and cost millions. The official position was clear. The rifle was adequate. Any accuracy problems were training issues. The expert consensus was unanimous. The Springfield 1903 A4 would not be modified. Snipers would adapt. The stakes couldn't be higher. Fifth Army was preparing for Operation Diadem, the spring offensive, designed to break through the Gustav Line and capture Rome. Intelligence estimated German forces had positioned over 500 trained snipers in defensive positions throughout the mountains. If American counter-sniper operations remained ineffective, the offensive would face devastating casualties. Fifth Army needed a solution. What they got was a stubborn Oklahoma farm boy who refused to accept that American rifles should be inferior to German ones. Corporal Jack Calvert, the man who wouldn't accept defeat. Jack Calvert was nobody's idea of an innovator. Born in 1916 in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, he'd spent his life on his family's wheat farm. His formal education ended after 8th grade when his father needed help during the Depression. His engineering experience consisted of fixing tractors and building chicken coops. But Jack Calvert could shoot. Growing up hunting deer and turkey in Oklahoma's forests, Calvert developed an instinctive understanding of rifle mechanics. He knew that consistency was everything. Same hold, same cheek pressure, same breathing. His father's old Winchester Model 70 had a stock that fit him perfectly. Every shot felt identical. When Calvert was drafted in 1942, his marksmanship scores at Fort Sill caught attention. After basic training, the Army sent him to the newly formed sniper training program at Camp Perry, Ohio. There, he qualified expert with the Springfield 1903 A4, despite hating every minute of shooting it. It felt wrong, Calvert later told military historian S.L.A. Marshall. Like trying to shoot left-handed. Your body knows something ain't right, but they tell you that's how it's supposed to be. Calvert arrived in Italy with the 88th Infantry Division in March 1944. Assigned to the division's scout company, he was partnered with Corporal Michael Russo as his spotter. Their first week in the mountains north of Casino confirmed Calvert's suspicions. The rifle was the problem, not the shooters. On March 18, 1944, Calvert and Russo were positioned in a bombed-out farmhouse overlooking Highway 6. A German sniper had killed 3 American soldiers that morning from a position in the rubble of Monte Cassino Monastery. Calvert had a clear line of sight at approximately 550 yards. He fired 6 rounds, all misses. The German sniper, untouched, killed a 4th American soldier, then disappeared. That night, back at company headquarters, Calvert couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about his father's Winchester, how the stock's raised comb brought his eye naturally to the scope. He thought about the chicken coops he'd built, how you solved problems with whatever materials you had available. Around 2 a.m., he walked to the company supply tent. He found a piece of scrap walnut from a damaged rifle stock, some leather from a torn equipment strap, and a small can of wood glue used for stock repairs. Using his trench knife and a borrowed wood rasp, Calvert began carving. His concept was simple. If the scope sat too high for the stock, raise the stock to meet the scope. Create an elevated section on the stock's comb that would position his cheek at the correct height for natural scope alignment. Make it removable so it wouldn't permanently damage Army property. By dawn, Calvert had created a crude raised cheek rest. It looked like a child's woodworking project, rough and unfinished. The leather padding was unevenly stitched. The whole contraption was held to the stock with friction and hope. But when Calvert shouldered his rifle, something magical happened. His cheek settled naturally onto the raised rest. His eye aligned perfectly with the scope. No craning, no awkward head position, just solid, consistent contact. For the first time since arriving in Italy, the Springfield 1903 A4 felt right. Act 4, The Forbidden Modification, 500 words. The Secret Test, March 20th, 1944. Calvert needed to test his modification before anyone saw it. At 0530 hours on March 20th, before the company woke, he and Russo hiked to an abandoned vineyard with a clear 600-yard sight line to a destroyed German pillbox. Calvert had marked a specific shell hole in the pillbox's concrete wall the previous day. It was roughly the size of a man's torso. He'd fired at it multiple times with his standard rifle configuration. Not one hit. Now, with his homemade cheek rest attached, he settled into position. The difference was immediate. His head position felt natural, locked in place. Through the scope, the crosshairs held steady on the target with each breath. First shot. The distinctive crack of the .30-06 round echoed through the valley. Through the scope, Calvert watched concrete dust puff from the center of the shell hole. Dead center, Russo whispered, checking through his spotting scope. Second shot. Another hit, inches from the first. Third shot. Hit. Fourth shot. Hit. 5 rounds. 5 hits at 600 yards. Calvert's hands were shaking, but not from nerves. From excitement. "Jack," Russo said slowly, "that's the best shooting I've ever seen with the 1903 A4. But as they walked back to camp, reality set in. What Calvert had done was, technically, illegal. Army Regulation 850-15 was explicit. No modifications to issued weapons will be made without written authorization from Ordnance Department. The regulation existed for good reason. Unauthorized modifications could weaken weapons, cause malfunctions, or create safety hazards. When Calvert showed his modification to Sergeant First Class Robert Mitchell, the Scout Company's senior NCO, Mitchell's face went pale. "Calvert, you attached unauthorized materials to a U.S. Army rifle. Do you know what they call that? Destruction of government property. That's a court-martial offense." "But Sergeant, it works. I just put 5 rounds into—" "I don't care if you shot the wings off a fly. You modified Army property without authorization. I should confiscate that rifle right now and send you to the Provost Marshal." Other snipers gathered around, examining Calvert's crude cheek rest. The reaction was mixed. Some were intrigued. Others were horrified. "That thing looks like it'll fall off after 10 rounds, said Corporal James Peterson. What happens when the glue fails during a firefight? Asked another sniper. Ordnance Department spent months designing this rifle, said Sergeant William Harris. You think some farm boy with a knife knows better than trained engineers? But Russo stood firm. I watched him shoot. 5 for 5 at 600 yards. When's the last time any of us did that? The argument was cut short when Captain Robert Donovan, Scout Company commander, entered the tent. What's going on here? Mitchell handed him Calvert's rifle. Sir, Corporal Calvert has made an unauthorized modification to his weapon. Donovan examined the cheek rest, turning the rifle over in his hands. His expression was unreadable. Calvert, he said quietly, you do realize this is completely against regulations? Yes, sir. And you did this anyway? Yes, sir. Because American snipers shouldn't be getting outshot by Germans, sir. The tent went silent. The confrontation, March 22nd, 1944. Captain Donovan didn't confiscate the rifle. Instead, he made a phone call that would change everything. On March 22nd, 1944, Lieutenant Colonel Hatcher arrived at the 88th Division's forward headquarters. With him came Major Theodore Kowalski from Ordnance Department, who'd been visiting Fifth Army to investigate the sniper effectiveness reports. They assembled in a field tent. Hatcher, Kowalski, Captain Donovan, Sergeant Mitchell, and Corporal Calvert, who stood at attention holding his modified rifle. Major Kowalski spoke first. His voice was cold. Corporal, you've committed a serious offense. Unauthorized weapon modification violates multiple regulations. This could result in court-martial. I understand, sir. Do you? Because this isn't just about regulations. It's about safety. Your modification could cause catastrophic weapon failure. The stock could crack. The scope could come loose. You could kill yourself or the man next to you. Calvert's jaw tightened. Sir, with respect, the only thing killing us right now is missing our shots. The room erupted. You don't get to decide that. Kowalski's face reddened. Engineers at Springfield Armory spent thousands of hours designing that rifle. You think you know better? I know it doesn't work right, sir. It works fine. The problem is training. Shooters need to adapt. We've been adapting for 4 months, Captain Donovan interrupted. My snipers are getting killed because they can't make shots that German snipers make routinely. That's not a training problem. That's an equipment problem. Kowalski turned on Donovan. Captain, you're out of line. The 1903A4 has been tested and approved. Tested at a range, Donovan shot back. Not in combat. Not in these mountains where 600-yard shots are standard. Lieutenant Colonel Hatcher raised his hand. Gentlemen, Major Kowalski, have you personally fired the 1903A4 in combat conditions? I've fired it at Aberdeen. That's not what I asked. Kowalski's silence was answer enough. Hatcher turned to Calvert. Corporal, can you demonstrate this modification's effectiveness? Yes, sir. Right now, sir. 30 minutes later, they stood at a makeshift range. Hatcher had set up targets at 400, 500, and 600 yards, standard combat engagement distances. He'd also brought 2 other division snipers as controls. The test was simple. Each shooter would fire 5 rounds at each distance, first with a standard 1903A4, then with Calvert's modified rifle. The first sniper, using the standard rifle, hit 2 of 15 targets. The second sniper hit 3 of 15. Calvert, with the standard rifle, hit 4 of 15. Then they switched to the modified rifle. First sniper, 12 of 15 hits. Second sniper, 11 of 15 hits. Calvert, 15 of 15 hits. Major Kowalski stared at the targets in silence. It's a fluke, he finally said. Shooter variability, environmental factors. Then let's shoot again, Hatcher said. They did. The results were identical. With Calvert's cheek rest, hit rates more than tripled. Hatcher turned to Kowalski. Major, I'm looking at a 300% improvement in combat effectiveness. What am I missing? You're missing the bigger picture, Colonel. We have 50,000 1903 A4 rifles in the field. We can't modify them all with homemade wood blocks. We can't authorize soldiers to start carving up their weapons. This opens a Pandora's box. So we let American soldiers die because we're afraid of paperwork? That's not fair. It's completely fair. Hatcher's voice was steel. Corporal Calvert has identified a design flaw and created a solution. Instead of court-martialing him, we should be thanking him. Before you continue, if you're finding this story valuable, please consider subscribing to Last Words. We bring you forgotten stories of innovation and courage from military history. It helps us continue creating content like this. Now back to the story. The argument continued for another hour. Kowalski raised valid concerns about field modifications, quality control, and logistics. But the data was undeniable. The cheek rest worked. Finally, Hatcher made a decision. Major, I'm authorizing field trials. We'll equip one sniper platoon with Calvert's modification. We'll track their performance for 2 weeks. If the results match what we saw today, we implement it division-wide. Colonel, I strongly advise against. Your objection is noted, but I'm not sending men into Operation Diadem with inferior equipment. Dismissed. As they left the tent, Hatcher pulled Calvert aside. Son, you just bet your career on a piece of wood. I hope to God you're right. So do I, sir. The field trials, March 25th, April 8th, 1944. Lieutenant Colonel Hatcher assigned 12 snipers from the 88th Division's Scout Company to test Calvert's modification. Calvert himself would train them on proper installation and use. They had 2 weeks to prove the concept before Operation Diadem kicked off. The division's ordnance section, under Hatcher's orders, produced refined versions of Calvert's design. A skilled carpenter from the 313th Engineer Battalion, Sergeant Antonio Moretti, improved the construction. The new cheek rests were carved from seasoned walnut, properly sanded and finished, with quality leather padding. Each was custom fitted to individual rifles and secured with wood screws through the existing stock. Still removable, but far more stable than Calvert's glued prototype. The data collection was meticulous. Each sniper logged every shot, range, conditions, hit or miss, time to neutralize target. They recorded ammunition expenditure, weapon malfunctions, and any issues with the modification. By April 1st, 1944, the numbers were staggering. Standard 1903A4, January-March 1944 baseline. First round hit rate, 400 to 600 yards, 31%. Average rounds to neutralized target, 3.2. Effective engagement range, 500 yards. Documented equipment failures, 0. Modified 1903A4 with Calvert cheek rest as March 25th, April 8th, 1944. First round hit rate, 400, 600 yards, 79%. Average rounds to neutralized target, 1.3. Effective engagement range, 700 plus yards. Documented equipment failures, 0. The improvement was beyond anyone's expectations, but statistics only told part of the story. Combat action, April 4, 1944, Monte Castiglione. Corporal Calvert and his spotter, Russo, were positioned in a stone shepherd's hut overlooking the Leary Valley. German forces controlled the high ground, and a particularly effective enemy sniper had killed 7 American soldiers over 3 days. Through his scope, Calvert spotted movement in a ruined church tower 680 yards distant, a brief glint of glass, a scope catching sunlight. Target, Russo whispered. Church tower, second window from left. Calvert settled his cheek onto the raised rest. The familiar, comfortable pressure. His eye aligned perfectly with the Weaver scope. The crosshairs steadied on the dark window opening. He controlled his breathing. Exhale halfway. Hold. Squeeze. The Springfield barked. Through the scope, Calvert saw the window frame splinter. A figure tumbled forward, falling from the tower. One shot, 680 yards. The German sniper who terrorized American positions for 3 days was dead. Word spread quickly through the division. The farm boy from Oklahoma and his illegal modification were getting results. The German perspective. Allied intelligence intercepted German communications during this period. A report from the 1st Parachute Division, dated April 6, 1944, noted, "American sniper effectiveness has increased dramatically in recent weeks. Previous advantage in precision fire has been neutralized. Recommend increased caution in defensive positions." After the war, German sniper Hauptfeldwebel Josef Allerberger, who fought in Italy, wrote in his memoir, "By spring 1944, the American snipers had transformed. Earlier in the campaign, we dominated long-range engagements. Suddenly, they were matching our accuracy. We lost many good men to American rifles we'd previously dismissed as inferior." Operation Diadem, May 11-25, 1944. The real test came with the spring offensive. Fifth Army launched Operation Diadem on May 11, 1944, with the goal of breaking through the Gustav Line and capturing Rome. By this time, Hatcher had authorized widespread distribution of the Calvert cheek rest. Division ordnance sections throughout Fifth Army were producing them as fast as possible. Approximately 340 modified rifles were in the field when the offensive began. The results were immediate and dramatic. Staff Sergeant James Richardson, 85th Infantry Division, recorded in his combat diary, May 13, 1944, "Our snipers are dominating. German positions that would have pinned down entire companies are being neutralized by single shooters. The difference from last month is night and day." Lieutenant Robert Hayes, 34th Infantry Division, wrote to his wife, "Our boys are finally winning the sniper war. There's a new confidence in the ranks. Men know that when they move, our marksmen can cover them effectively." The quantitative data from Operation Diadem was compiled by Fifth Army Headquarters. Counter-sniper operations effectiveness. German snipers neutralized, 127 confirmed. American sniper casualties, 23, down from 67 in previous comparable operations. Average engagement range, 587 yards, up from 423 yards. Ammunition efficiency, 1.4 rounds per neutralization, down from 3.2. But perhaps the most telling statistic was this. Infantry casualty rates from sniper fire during Operation Diadem were 64% lower than during previous Italian offensive operations. The lives saved. After the war, military analysts estimated that improved American sniper effectiveness during Operation Diadem and subsequent Italian operations saved between 800 to 200 American lives. These were soldiers who would have been killed or wounded by German snipers if American counter-sniper operations had remained at January 1944 effectiveness levels. Captain William Bradford, who led an infantry company during the drive to Rome, later wrote, "I don't know Corporal Calvert's name then. I just knew that for the first time in Italy, when my men advanced, they weren't getting picked off by invisible German snipers. Someone, somewhere, had fixed something, and my boys came home because of it." Before we continue with the final chapter, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. These stories of forgotten heroes deserve to be remembered. Now, let's see what happened to Jack Calvert and his innovation. By June 1944, when Fifth Army entered Rome, virtually every American sniper in Italy carried a modified Springfield 1903A4. The design had evolved from Calvert's crude prototype into a standardized component, produced by division ordnance sections using templates and specifications refined by Sergeant Moretti and approved by Ordnance Department. The farm boys' illegal modification had become standard equipment. The aftermath, recognition and humility. In July 1944, Lieutenant Colonel Hatcher submitted a formal report to Army Ordnance Department recommending the Calvert cheek rest be incorporated into all future sniper rifle designs. He also recommended Corporal Calvert receive the Soldier's Medal for his innovation. Major Kowalski, to his credit, supported both recommendations. In his endorsement, he wrote, "While Corporal Calvert's initial actions violated regulations, his innovation has proven invaluable. This incident highlights the importance of listening to field feedback and the danger of rigid adherence to doctrine when evidence suggests modification is necessary." The Army awarded Calvert the Soldier's Medal in September 1944. He was also promoted to sergeant and offered a position at Aberdeen Proving Ground to work on weapon development. He declined. "I'm not an engineer," Calvert told Hatcher. "I'm a rifleman. My place is with my unit." Calvert continued serving with the 88th Division through the end of the war in Italy. He survived the Gothic Line offensive and was in northern Italy when Germany surrendered in May 1945. He returned to Oklahoma in December 1945, received his discharge, and went back to farming. He rarely spoke about his wartime service. When asked about the cheek rest that bore his name, he typically said, "I just made the rifle fit right. Anyone could have done it." The numbers that mattered. By war's end, the Army had produced approximately 28,000 Springfield 1903A4 rifles. An estimated 18,000 received the Calvert-style cheek rest modification, either in theater or during depot-level maintenance. Post-war analysis by the Army's Operations Research Office calculated that the modification improved sniper effectiveness by an average of 147% across all measured metrics. The report concluded, "The Calvert cheek rest represents one of the most cost-effective combat modifications of the war. At minimal material cost and production time, it dramatically enhanced weapon system performance." Modern legacy. Jack Calvert's innovation didn't end with World War II. When the Army developed the M1C and M1D sniper variants of the M1 Garand, designers incorporated an elevated cheek rest into the stock design. The same principle applied to the M14, sniper variants in the 1960s, the M21 in the 1970s, and continues today with the M24 and M110 sniper systems. Every modern military sniper rifle features an adjustable cheek rest as standard equipment. The principle Calvert discovered in a tent in Italy, that consistent cheek weld requires the stock to match the sight line, not the other way around, is now fundamental to precision rifle design worldwide. The humble hero's final words. Jack Calvert died in 1987 at age 71, still living on his family farm in Oklahoma. In one of his few recorded interviews, given to a local newspaper in 1985, he was asked what he wanted to be remembered for. "I don't need to be remembered," he said. "The boys who didn't come home, they're the ones who deserve remembering. I just fixed a rifle. They gave everything." But the men who fought alongside him remembered differently. At Calvert's funeral, a letter was read from Captain Bradford, the infantry officer whose company Calvert's innovation had helped protect. It said simply, "Because of you, we came home. Thank you." The lesson. Jack Calvert's story teaches us that expertise isn't always found in laboratories or headquarters. Sometimes the best solutions come from the people closest to the problem, the ones whose lives depend on getting it right. He saw a problem that experts had declared unsolvable. He trusted his experience over official doctrine. He risked his career to do what he knew was right. And because one farm boy refused to accept that American rifles should be inferior, hundreds of American soldiers survived a war they might not have otherwise. That's the power of one person who refuses to accept defeat.